So some of our required reading is conscious loving, and then we have love languages in the relationship realm. So, I mean, there are a lot of great books. I've read personally a number of books that are really fascinating on the subject of relationship. Certainly, I've read books on the difference between the male and female brain.
Very
I mean,
interesting.
there are just so many books in our library around the subject. But what I try to do when I pick a book, when you and I, hash it out, what book might be best in service to people, we chose love languages because it's very practical. It's, in a way, it's quite easy to just digest and understand. And it's an interesting read. And it actually helps a lot of people heal. Understanding that males and females have different neurological, qualities and tendencies is one thing. Understanding that the way that we love each other is a much broader but more relative subject for people on a daily basis. And what I mean by that is understanding that, as an example, you have a larger communication center in your brain biologically than I do, so your tendency is to be, to use language and communicate more than, say, a male is interesting to know. Great. Oh, well, that's fascinating. But it's not as relevant as understanding that you might be a person who understands love expressed by being through an act of service. And I might be a person who understands that love is by receiving gifts, but at the end of the day, we do, quote unquote, love each other differently. And just to sort of, put a cap on that, the thought is we love each other differently, but to understand that love is an action. I think a lot of times people say, they talk about love, they say love is this and love is that, but I think of love as something that is, of course, an ongoing pattern of behavior.
Yes.
So love, you wake up, you love someone that day, because you behave a certain way. You make choices that are, active choices. So loving a person, according to the way this book sort of unpacks the conversation, is that loving people is very much in action. So if it's loving someone, it's in the way that I speak to them. If it's loving someone, it might be in the way that I'm in service to them, or how I'm gifting them things. It could be how I am
Physically
touching them. And then the last one.
Jeez, I lost it now. Let's repeat.
Let's repeat. We've got touch,
physical touch, words of affirmation, acts of service, gifting, and I
believe it is our
quality time. How can I forget that? Jesus, I thought that mine was quality.
It could have nothing to do.
I think you already got it so out of my system.
Well, I was going to say, it could be something that I look over and I'm like, oh, quality time. Well, you know what?
God,
okay, we're going to have a little,
hilarious.
okay, wait, we're going to keep this in the video. We're not going to cut this.
Of course.
Here's why.
That's so real.
Here's why. Because quality time is probably our biggest, weakest love language.
True.
And here's why, for people out there, who are observing, and maybe other people, you're going to relate to this. For us, quality time, and I think it's probably a modern, epidemic.
Phenomena.
Yeah. That quality time is, as an example, for you, even different than for me, which is further ironic, because I consider quality time, and this.
Just being around.
Right, this. I consider quality time if you and I go to jiu-jitsu class, if we go hang out with friends, if we go to a movie together. Quality time for me is we're together doing things.
So male.
Right. And quality time for you is we
You
are
and I-
eye-gazing.
No, that's so not
That
true.
we sit in meditation and we eye gaze for 5 whole minutes. No, but how do you define quality time?
Well, it's definitely exclusive to you and me.
Okay.
Considering that we already spend so much time with other people around us.
Mm-hmm.
Quality time is the time where you and I have focused time together, not necessarily eye gazing, but where we're doing something different than we usually do.
Okay.
You know, where we're not working or training or hanging out with friends, but where we're actually eye gazing for 5 minutes.
Well, what's so funny is, as a male, and again, maybe this is a male thing. I don't want to, I don't want to reduce this completely to my gender, but I feel it's rather male. And that is that when we do something together, like build a teacher training manual or develop something, I actually consider that quality time because in my mind, I say, look at us doing something together.
Exactly. The word building is already
building together.
Building, constructing.
And look at what we're producing together.
Yes.
And for me, what's ironic is I actually measure that as an act of love. Because for you to be by my side helping me develop something, I interpret that as you love me. Because I don't know why you would do that if you didn't.
Me neither.
I mean, and I'm being very sincere. I don't know why anybody would do. I mean, and in all honesty, and again, of course, all acts of love come from your perception of love. So in other words, I help other people because I love them.
Which is an act of service.
Correct.
Yes.
And so in my mind, that's why you're doing it for me. So
because I'm in service to you?
No, because you love me. So if you looked at me and said, I helped you build that, but I don't love you. I just did it because I thought it was interesting. I did it because I didn't have anything else to do. I would be really surprised.
Yeah.
And the reason that would surprise me is because I don't view using my time that way. Which is interesting because it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make me right.
Yes.
It doesn't make my variation of that being an act of love correct. You could literally just help me build a manual because you want to learn how to build a manual and you have no emotional connection to me and no desire to really help me at all. It's all about you helping you. But that's what's so interesting.
Selfish, yeah.
Correct.
And to me, what came up is acts of service is something that I understand also in friendships, that kind of love, where to me it's very, very important, or I perceive that someone loves me as a friend if they help me with something, if they're loyal to me through their support. That doesn't mean that they necessarily are in love with me. So an act of service to me is not part of my love language of intimate relationship, but a friendship. So even to look at different variations of how you understand giving and receiving love in the context of romantic and intimate love and friendships varies, because it's already to me different how I show my love to you as my partner and how I understand receiving love. So there's so many distinctions here already.
Well, I think it's important to understand when we're breaking down this different, the different layers of this, is like understanding that love, if some people really struggle with forgiving their parents because they didn't feel their parents were there enough for them. And I always have this conversation with them, and this is why this book, this sort of thinking, becomes relevant to these individual conversations. And what I'm trying to get an individual to observe is that their understanding or interpretation of love is not necessarily their parents' interpretation of love. So if
It's through their own lens, yes.
100%. So if their father went to work a lot and did not spend a lot of quality time with them, they interpret that as not being loved. They weren't loved. They're disappointed, and they have a whole narrative running about their relationship with their father. They were unloved.
Broken,
They wish they had been, and all because their version or variation of love language is different. And I think that that's such an important thing for people to understand is you need to see how people love, and you need to understand that the way they love must be, you must embrace it, and you must accept it without trying to adjust it to be something that is just simply not natural for them. They can show up. I mean, look, I understand something very specific, and it's this. You could argue the point that if you really love me and you know I love to get gifts, you'll bring me gifts because you know I love them. And if you really love me, you'll do things for me that you know I love.
Yes.
It's very easy to make that argument. But what you're asking me to do in this situation is to adjust how I express my love.
So
now,
I can understand the love.
so that you can understand my love. So what you're asking again is for me to change to accommodate your interpretation, your understanding, your level of comprehension, rather than you doing work on your end to understand me. And I think that there's nothing more powerful for a human in terms of your personal experience. There's nothing more powerful than adjusting yourself rather than trying to enroll another person in adjusting for you. Because again, it's very easy for me to put the workload on you. Hey, you carry the heavy weight by changing. I'll stay the same. And I don't think that that's the formula for becoming extraordinary.
Yeah, and also in the end, the person is not doing anything wrong. Just because it's a different
100%,
language and a different way, again, doesn't mean that they're not loving. So I don't even honestly see it as work or adjustment. I really see it as accepting and understanding. Just like unicorn and lion, you are just different. Your behavior is different, but it doesn't mean what I make it mean. It just means what you make it mean.
Right. I could try to get you to be a more this or more that variation of your, person, of your nature, but it would be far more valuable if I could make the adjustment for myself, which makes me less fixed and more fluid, and it makes me more. Actually, it helps me to adjust better to everything in my life, not just you, because the more people, places, and things around me that change to accommodate me, the less I'm forced to change, which means that I become very fixed, very rigid, and very difficult to deal with. Yeah. I'm not flowing. So the most important thing for people to take away from this conversation is if people speak different languages, you need to listen for what their language is, learn how to identify it and spot it and be grateful for it, and really celebrate the moments where you actually see this person. Like the case that I mentioned earlier about the dad who works all the time, the son that looks at the dad and says, "Dad, man, I know we don't spend a lot of time together, but man, do I appreciate how hard you work."
Because you provided for us and you made many things happen.
Huge. And again, this father just spending one-on-one time with their son in a very particular way, like throwing a baseball, that just may not be how this individual understands love, which again, it's okay. If you want that individual, like if I'm a son and I want to get quality time with my dad, how much more clever would it be if I figured out how to go do something with my dad that he loves to do where we are one-on-one?
Well, you created. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, I want one-on-one time with my dad. Why not go down to his office and hey, Dad, I'd love to understand better what you do. And he's,
Yeah, which is also an example from our relationship when I brought up quality time many, many years ago. And I
What is
was
that?
asking for quality time,
Right.
for us to have quality time. In
I've
that
heard of this thing you
moment,
call quality
yeah,
time.
I
Yes.
was trying to impose it on you to create quality time for us, because that
Right.
would show me how much you love me,
Right,
because I
yes.
expressed it to you.
I remember that.
However, and we got to a place through communication. You said, I'm not opposed to quality time,
Right.
but I'm really bad in creating it. If
Yes.
you create it for us, I'm down.
100%.
So
Is that not true too?
well, yeah, it is true.
Right.
So I just had to take it upon myself, because this is my language,
Right.
to create it. And then we were able to enjoy it together. And this is, again, what we just said. You can't put it on the other person to speak your language, because then they will fail. You're setting them up for failure anyways already.
Which means you're gonna have failed expectations,
True.
and then you're going to have tension constantly throughout the relationship, because they're going to predictably show up
Yeah.
failing over and over and over as you continue to look for them to show you love the way that you expect it
Understand
to be
love, yeah.
shown.
Yeah.
All right, beautiful.